Sveiki. Taigi, tai, kas turėjo būti live, šiandieną vis dėlto bus įrašas. Nes dėl techninių problemų live pokalbis neišsisaugojo, tačiau mano pašnekovė Nadya tikrai maloniai sutiko atsakyti tuos pačius klausimus dar kartą, tam, kad mes visi viską išgirstumėme apie mamų miegą. Taigi, sveikinuosi su Nadya. Hello, Nadya.
Hi, Dovil. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again. Thank you so much for agreeing to record the conversation one more time. Because, as we all know, due to technical issues, it was not possible to record it, and the information is too valuable to lose it. So thank you again for agreeing to do that.
It's my pleasure.
Nadya, let's start from a small introduction. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my background is in health psychology, and I spent 8 years working in research in health psychology. When I finished my PhD in child development, I got really interested in the topic of stress and health. And that's what I set out to research. And then I had my own child almost 5 years ago, and we went through all the sleepless nights and all the problems with her not sleeping and me not sleeping. And that's how I got really interested, like first-hand experience in the topic of sleep deprivation and how it plays into this stress, health, sleep. And so from then on, I got more and more interested in less theoretical work and in bringing my knowledge and my own experience into helping other moms to overcome sleep problems, be it with their child or with their own sleep and rest.
Okay. Nadya, it seems we are sleeping at least 1/3 of our life. We spend sleeping. But what is this all about, the sleep? Why do we need to sleep at all? Why it's important to us?
Right. It seems like such a waste of time, right? Why sleep when you can be efficient? And you would even find advice, get up earlier, spend less time in bed, then get more done. Well, this is a very misguided advice, because when it comes to our health, sleep and adequate sleep, enough sleep is as important. And some people will even argue that it's more important for our health and well-being than nutrition and exercise. So, you have to eat healthy to be healthy. Well, you also have to sleep. And I can quote one neuroscientist who studies sleep, and he wrote this book. It's called Why We Sleep. His name is Matthew Walker, where he writes, there's not one organ or one system in our body and brain that would be enhanced by sleep. So if we talk about our physical health, think about energy, think about how our tissues repair when we sleep, think about immune system. If you haven't slept enough, you will be more susceptible to colds, for example. When it comes to mental health, it's our emotional regulation, it's how we deal with stress. It's also how creative we are, and it's also how we're able to empathize with other people, including our children. Mm-hmm. So that feeds into the question of, being a good mom. So that's why it's really, really important to get enough sleep.
And I was reading a report which was made actually in Australia, telling that sleep deprivation is one of the main causes of postnatal depression, even in mothers. Mm-hmm. What would you say about that? Can it relate?
It's a very interesting point, because luckily there's now more awareness of postnatal depression and anxiety, and the statistics says that about every 5th woman, and maybe it's even an underestimate because not everybody will go and seek help, but even every 5th is a lot. It's a lot of women who experience some sort of mood disorders after they give birth. And it's interesting how sleep plays into it, because we know that when you haven't slept, your emotional state, your mood will be worse. your anxiety will be worse. You will be less able to cope with depressive thoughts, with anxiety. So we definitely know, and luckily it's more recognized, that sleep deprivation can be either a cause or at least an exacerbating factor in those postnatal disorders. On the other hand, when you are depressed and when you are anxious, it of course affects how well you sleep, especially anxiety. When all those crazy thoughts are running through your head, it's really difficult to switch off. So it becomes this, self-amplifying loop that it can be for some women very difficult to get out of.
Yeah, especially if you are like a first-time mom, you have a lot of thoughts. And one of them is like, you are physically tired, that's one thing, but then you're always worried about, being a good mom, taking good care of the baby, and this and that. And you know what, when my girls were little, and I was telling my family women that, I'm tired, I would like to sleep more, I'm not that happy. And they would all say, that's how motherhood looks like. Forget about sleep. Nobody sleeps when you have a baby. And I was kind of feeling a little kind of guilty for wanting to rest, for wanting to sleep. Do you meet that, or was that just my experience?
I think, unfortunately, it's not just your experience. We have this older generation who knew how to, suck it up, how to be tough. They'll tell you, well, in my time, nobody talked about depression, and it's just this new modern fancy thing. Well, the truth is that, yes, parenting does come with a big level of sacrifice, but it doesn't mean that you have to abandon all of your needs. It doesn't mean that you have to feel guilty for wanting something as basic as sleep. So, for example, nobody would make you feel guilty for wanting to eat. And when you breastfeed, you're hungry all the time. And personally, I remember having to get up at night and have a pancake and a banana when I was breastfeeding because I was so hungry. I don't know how much I ate. And nobody would even think of saying like, oh, come on, you're eating too much. And the same with sleep, it's such a basic need. So why feel guilty for needing it? Yes, of course, there will be less sleep for a mom, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try and improve the situation and at least get as much as possible at this time.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose that is also very different for each person because, I do remember when I was 20, I could spend all the night partying and then go to the university, and that was easy as that. But when I got my twins, I was 39. And that was completely different story to after a sleepless night to take care about my kids, to be patient and etc. So I suppose, of course, it's an age thing for me, but I think everybody handles that differently as well.
I suppose so, and you're right. When we're younger, we deal with sleep deprivation much better. As we become older, you can definitely feel the effect much stronger. It also goes the other way. When you get older, you also feel the positive effect of having slept or having exercised. You kind of see it right away. It's easier to convince yourself that you should be doing it. But unfortunately, it doesn't get better with age. And so if you're a mom at 18, there are pros and cons, right? But one of the pros, of course, is that your body is in a much better shape to handle all this, even though your mind might not be prepared at all for what's coming your way.
So, but maybe that's also a reason why our older women in the family, they maybe didn't experience that sleep deprivation so much because it was much more usual to have children at a younger age than we do now.
That is, of course, one possibility. I know many women of my parents' generation that would have kids well, certainly before 25. That was the norm back then. And now, so I live in Denmark. I think the average age for the first child here is 29 or something like this, or maybe even 30, I can't remember. But it's getting postponed, and it has its consequences. And that's one thing. Another thing is that I don't know about Lithuania, but I grew up in Russia, and at that time, the philosophy was that the child has to be fed by the clock. So what my mom told me is that she would feed the baby at 12 and then at 6. So she was, I mean, she said like it was hard for me to get like to set the alarm for 6 and then get up, but still, I mean, if me or my brother didn't ask for milk in the middle, then it's still you get 6 hours, right? This is really, for a lot of moms, it's a luxury, right?
Yeah, these days, I mean, if we tell mom like 6 hours of an uninterrupted sleep, that really sounds like a luxury in many families. Well, yeah, the situation was different. And I think that it's also, well, of course, this time had pros and cons. I mean, many women were breastfeeding really short time. But on the other hand, yeah, they were younger. And one more thing, which I think was different, that in many families, the grandmother lived nearby, or maybe, I mean, everybody lived close to each other. Now, modern parents very often are left alone. And when I do sleep consulting regarding children's sleep, I often meet moms that are solo moms. They don't have really too much help anymore.
Yes, I agree that the situation we live now, the social situation is very different, even from our parents, let alone, you know, when we lived in tribes. I mean, it's not very natural to live as a nuclear family for people, right? It's more like a modern invention. And before, you know, what's the saying? It takes a village to raise a child, right? So before, a young mom would have, first of all, she would have a lot of experience with other babies before she had her own. Now, not only it's common that your baby is the first baby you're ever holding in your arms, it's also common that you don't get much help with that baby. And that, of course, creates a lot of questions and a lot of anxiety around being moms. And then that anxiety, of course, is part of what creates the postpartum anxiety and part of what creates the sleep issues for moms.
Okay, so, but let's take it as we have it. I mean, we have now too little help as mothers, and we have too little sleep as mothers. So a baby who maybe is waking up every 2 hours, a newborn, what can we do still to get more sleep? Maybe we can put that into a certain algorithm, what we have to pay attention to so we get more rest.
Right. Okay. And so I would maybe make it question even a bit broader, right? Because the newborn stage has its issues, but when we move past 6 months mark, then the answers are very different, right? Because the newborn does have to wake up every 2 to 3 hours to feed, and at this age, it's the mom who has to adjust. And here it's, of course, an excellent question. How can we help ourselves? Again, you would make your life easier, and it would be from, you know, we talked about how it used to be in older days. In older days, women slept with their babies. And of course, sleeping with your baby is much easier than if you have to get out of your bed, go to the crib, maybe in a different room, pick up the baby, breastfeed in the chair, and then go back to bed. This is much more effort. That, of course, brings this very difficult topic about co-sleeping and bed sharing, whether it's safe or not. And I don't want to go into this debate, but let's just face it, you know, by choosing safety, we're also making our lives more difficult. So it is interesting to look at, you know, pros and cons. So that's one thing. And again, I'm not advocating it. Everybody should decide for themselves what's right. But that's for many women, it ends up the survival strategy.
I have this question there. I mean, I'm there with you completely about bed sharing, because it's a topic everybody has to decide for themselves. Some mothers feel it's a right thing to do, to sleep with their baby. Some feel it's better when the baby sleeps separately, especially that today we have a kind of small cribs that can be adjusted to the bed. So there are a bit of a kind of safety things to do about this co-sleeping. But I've heard one thing, and I want to check it with you, that I've heard that in the first month, when the baby's sleep cycle is really short, and when the baby sleeps with the mother, that the sleep cycles somehow synchronizes with each other's, and that mothers also start to sleep in a shorter sleep cycles. Is it true?
You know, I've also heard this, but this is an area where we have a lot of controversies, and that's why I still think, like, even if it's true, every woman should decide for herself whether it works for her. And as an so for some women, it's really it's a life savior, but for others, myself included, I was planning to sleep next to my baby in the sidecar, but I couldn't because I was waking from all the noises that she was making. So even if we tell women now that yes, it's natural and your sleep cycles will synchronize and you will wake up at the same time, sure, you can give it a try, but maybe it won't work for you because you're disturbed by the baby, because maybe you cannot sleep when somebody is sucking on your breast, and that's also very common.
That was me. I couldn't sleep when somebody is close to me, that close. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I really think it's a question of what works, and that's one, right? That's only one aspect, because there are also other aspects. It does take some time for the milk supply to get established, and of course at that time, the very first weeks, we want to give the woman every opportunity to breastfeed. So there's this demand supply system that kicks in, and she produces enough milk for her baby. But once that's in place, and from what I understand, that happens sometime between 6 and 12 weeks, then we can start thinking about maybe pumping some milk during the night, or even supplementing one feed with formula. I know there will be a lot of people who will roll eyes at this advice, but I mean, put it in a perspective, one feed out of how many? 10?
Yeah.
Your baby's still getting enough of your milk. What I'm getting at is that if you have somebody else, for example, your partner, take the baby for one feed, it will give you a solid stretch of maybe 4 hours where your sleep will be uninterrupted. And this is so important because that it will give your body the opportunity to go into deep sleep, which physically is the most restorative sleep. Of course, any type of sleep is important. Also, the sleep that comes after that chunk of deep sleep is also important. But at least if you get those 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep, it puts you in a much better shape than if you have to wake up every 2 hours, sometimes every hour. Then you never have a chance to go into deep sleep, and you wake up completely, exhausted, feeling really, out of it, and so on.
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting advice, and well, if I remember myself at early age of my twins, so 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep already sounded like a big luxury, and I think that would be making a big difference, because when you feed the baby and until you fall asleep, because I was not able to sleep when my baby was nursing, and until you put the babies back, 2 babies, you maybe need to change the diaper, and then the babies fall asleep, and until I fall asleep, and it's time for me to wake up again, because time is running really fast. So 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep, it would probably be a big game changer.
Yeah, I think for many women it would be, and even if your baby's on formula and then you really can do shifts with your partner. I've known several families where they would break those 12 hours where they were at home at least, right? I mean, at some point one of them had to go to work, but if you break it into 6 and 6, so one person is with the baby for 6 hours, sleeping or not sleeping, but that parent is responsible for giving the bottle.
Yeah.
And then once your shift is over, you go sleep. You know.
Yeah.
And that works beautifully for some families.
Okay, that is interesting. What else mothers can do? Because one of our common advice is sleep when your baby sleeps. Shall we do that?
Yes, and I would say here it depends on how old is the baby. Because in the first months, when you really are waking up every 2 hours, it could be great if you can catch up on some of that lost sleep, because you'll have to be waking up. And that can be, again, it can be just a little bit more sleep, just a little bit more of, feeling restored. However, once your baby starts sleeping longer, this strategy can actually backfire, because here we have to understand that your sleep need is actually limited. Most healthy people adults need between 7 and 9 hours within 24 hours. And you can only sleep that much. And then you can either put it as a chunk, or you can spread it through the day. And when you have a baby, you kind of have to spread it through the day, because the baby wakes you up. But if you're finding that your baby is sleeping and then you wake up and you have hard time falling back asleep, it might be that you're stretching your sleep too thin.
Too much.
The more you stretch it, the thinner it gets. So it's harder for your brain, for your body to go into this deep sleep. And so the way it works is that we have this sleep drive. The longer you stay awake, the more of it accumulates. The stronger the sleep drive, the easier it is for you to fall into deep sleep. But let's say you took a nap in the middle of the day. You kind of removed some of that sleep drive. So especially if you took a nap late in the day, there is not enough for you for the night, which means that you might easily fall asleep, at your usual bedtime, but then you wake up in the middle of the night and you cannot sleep because the sleep drive is not there. Or another example of sleeping when your baby sleeps, a very common mistake, or I wouldn't even say mistake because it makes sense. If you know that you will be woken up many times a night, it just makes sense to give yourself more opportunity to sleep. For example, go to bed earlier or stay in bed later, and then you end up staying in bed for 10 hours, but you cannot sleep for 10 hours. So somewhere within those 10 hours, there will be a time where you cannot sleep. For example, you've breastfed and then you cannot sleep. Or I also wonder those women who say they cannot sleep and breastfeed. Maybe it would have been easier if they didn't spend that much time in bed. I don't know, it's just a hypothesis. I haven't checked. But, if your sleep drive is strong enough, you can probably fall asleep with the baby latched on.
Well, it's probably very, very also individual, because somebody's as a person, somebody is a very light sleeper. Somebody can sleep anywhere, anytime. I mean, there are people who can sleep, I don't know, even the train is passing by. But some are very, very, very sensitive. What else can help us to get more rest? So getting back to what you have said, so if we find ourselves in the night that it's difficult for us to fall asleep after nursing a baby, or we have a window or when we cannot fall asleep, so maybe we should look at the general hours we spend sleeping. This might be somewhere our daily routine is not completely correct, right? Okay.
Yes, it could
what
be
else?
one thing to look at. Yeah. Another thing, if you have trouble falling asleep, is this advice that I'm sure everybody has heard, especially from you as a baby sleep consultant, that it's very important to have a consistent bedtime and wake up time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's also important for adults because we have these circadian rhythms, this biological clock that makes us sleepy and awake at the same time of the day every day, because there's this 24-hour cycle. If you go to bed and wake up at different times every day, you confuse your body clock, you dysregulate it. On the other hand, if you do it at the same time every single day, your body gets trained that now it's time to sleep. Now it's time to get up, and then you don't have to put that much effort into trying to fall asleep, and you start waking up without the alarm clock.
Yeah, that's that is important in children's. I can see that is important in adults as well. So basically, we can at least try to put our days on the routine, same as we do with the babies, with the children. Then.
Yeah, so routine is also very important for adults, and it's not only it's not only when we go to bed, but it's also what we do right before bedtime. Because, for children, we tell parents, they need some time to wind down. You shouldn't stimulate them in the evening, right? Well, the same advice applies to moms. If you run around and try to finish all the chores or do some work right up bedtime, and your mind is, spinning, okay, what haven't I finished, and then you expect to turn off the light and switch off, that doesn't work this way, because both your body and your mind need some time to calm down. Yeah. And so from that perspective, it's good to start thinking about bedtime an hour or two before and engage into something in activities that are not super stimulating. Limit screen time, or if you can help it, switch, not watch TV, not work on computer, not look at the phone. I know it's maybe not very realistic.
So no social media, no Facebook, no Instagram before sleep, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, like when your child is asleep, you finally get a couple of hours for yourself. You wanna look at what your Facebook friends are up to, and I can totally understand that. And I mean, you can make the situation better. Okay, let's first explain why the screens are bad, right? Because in order for us to sleep, what helps us sleep is a hormone melatonin, which is released in the evening in response to the environment getting darker. But it doesn't happen instantaneously. You need some time for that reaction to kick off, for the levels of melatonin to reach certain concentrations, and then for your brain to react to it. So think that about, an hour or two before bedtime, you might even that early start thinking about your bedtime and dim the lights around so that you give your brain a signal that soon it's going to be time to wind down. Now, it's easy to do with your, apartment, because then you can turn off the upper lights and just turn on your desk lamp or whatever it is, or you can draw the curtains. The thing is, if you're looking at the screen, the typical light that screens emit, it mimics a lot of daylight. There's a lot of blue waves that block melatonin. Basically, this kind of light keeps you awake. And if you cannot stay awake from your screen, what you can do, it's not, of course, the replacement, but it makes it a little bit better if you install apps that change the brightness and the spectrum of the screen. So, if you have it, what it looks like. Suddenly around 10 or 11, everything starts looking green and orange, and there's no blue light at all. So you can at least install that.
Okay, so but that's a common recommendation we give for kids, that they shouldn't watch TV before bed, 2 hours at least, and no smartphones and etc. Yeah, that's something we have to do for ourselves as well, but it's more difficult, I suppose.
Yeah, because we control our kids' screen time, but there's nobody who controls our screen time except
that is absolutely true. And one thing you mentioned a few times is, in general, the anxieties, the stress. And that is also something that is very difficult to control, even more difficult than the screen time. But this is something that is influencing our sleep or our general peace of mind in a big way. What do you think we can do about that?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the reasons why a lot of moms say that they cannot fall asleep at night, even when their baby sleeps. And if you are one of those moms, I want you to know that this is actually very common. Even if somebody says, you're not tired enough, this is not true. What happens is that probably you're overtired. And this is just getting back to your question, David, is when your stress levels are too high, then figuratively speaking, your brain forgets how to switch off. I don't want to get too far into physiology, but this is basically one of the way nervous system breaks down, is that it forgets, it loses its ability to down-regulate itself, to switch off. So if you're constantly stressed and tired and sleep deprived, which is a huge stressor, then it affects your nervous system in this negative way that you lose your ability to relax and to switch off. And so, of course, the remedy for it is sleeping enough, but then we cannot. But what else can we do? We can minimize stress during the day. And a lot of stress actually comes not from the objective situation. I'm not saying that having a child is not stressful, but it's also a lot of thinking around what we're supposed to be doing, whether that we're doing it right, what everybody expects of us, what it means to be a good mom, and so on. And so a modern woman often puts incredibly high expectations on herself, such as, you have to pick up your baby every second it cries, and you also have to look top notch, and you have to have your nails done, and you have to be a good wife to your husband, and you have to have a meal with 3 dishes ready when he comes home, and so
yeah.
I don't know if that, it's also country specific, and I think when we talk about gender equality, things are getting better, especially in the West. But I know also back from Russia, there's a lot of conversations around it right now. There's still a lot of expectations, like you're the woman, you have to this, and this. And that's incredible pressure. And so the remedy for it is just to have to let go of these, to examine those expectations, to examine where they come from, and to let go of being perfect. To let go of having a perfectly clean house, to let go, and having pizza for dinner sometimes, nobody's gonna die, and those kinds of things, are just letting go of being always getting it right, and remembering that your rest, you being lazy, it's actually a way of taking care of yourself. And why it's important to take care of yourself, because by taking care of yourself, you're actually taking care of your child. Your child needs a mentally healthy mom. So if you are taking care of your mental health by resting, you are making it better for your child's development.
So basically, we have to make this a certain switch in our attitude, in our mind, which would say that mom's rest or mom's sleep is not a luxury. It's a basic need, is a priority which has to be, taken care about. Because I think that sometimes we really focus so much about being these good mothers for our kids that we really forget about mothering ourselves a little bit as well.
Yeah, and maybe an analogy will help here about this feeling of guilt and luxury. Resting is luxury. When you breastfeed, you have to nourish yourself. You have to eat. right? You wouldn't think about, okay, there will be some women doing this, but I mean, common sense would probably tell you that you shouldn't go on a strict diet if you want to produce enough milk to feed your child. So you will be eating a lot and you won't be feeling guilty about it, right?
Yeah.
So that's to nourish your child physically, you have to nourish yourself. But that's the same time, the same thing with emotional nourishment. In order to be, compassionate, empathetic mom, you have to take care of yourself. You have to provide that emotional nourishment in the way of sleep. You have to give yourself those resources so that you can then give them further to your child. If you don't have it, you cannot give it to anyone else.
Yeah, that's true. Once you don't have it, there is basically nothing to give. And but can you talk a little bit about this, let's say, later stage, when we pass the newborn stage and we have a baby who is maybe 6 months old and mother hasn't slept 4 hours, never ever during these 6 months? What is there we have to look also into?
Yes, and I think this is when a very interesting question about the so-called sleep training. Your baby comes in and what the baby really needs, and this is where we start talking about really starting to balance your need for sleep as a mom with the needs of your child. Because I often hear from moms, even of 2 years old, my baby is not going to be baby forever. She needs me at night. I'm going to provide it for her. This is how nature meant it. And maybe not a lot of women realize that some of it are sleep associations. I'm sure you talk a lot about what sleep associations are, that they're not really needs for contact. It's just that the child cannot fall asleep in any other way. And when we talk about teaching the child to sleep more independently or sleeping through, it doesn't mean that we have to leave the child cry alone. There is a lot of ways to do it in a more respectful and gentle way. But the idea itself, for many women, the idea itself that you have to interfere, what about attachment? What about all those things, Here's what I have to say, like, what does your child need? Does your child need a healthy sleep just as much as you? Yes, of course. It's important for their health and development. Does your child need a fun, happy, well-rested mom? Absolutely. Does your child need a grumpy, sleep-deprived mom? Probably not, right? So again, this taking care, like the idea that you're selfish for taking care of your sleep by helping your child to sleep better, I feel like it's misguided, and it's based on some misunderstanding about what attachment parenting is. I mean, to me, attachment parenting is not replying to every peep. It's actually responding, being able to tell what the real needs are. And when the child actually needs you to set certain boundaries, to help them learn healthier habits and so on, to me, that's responsive attachment parenting.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially that, yes, as you said, teaching your child to sleep more independently, it doesn't happen overnight. That's one thing. So interfering is not something that you come there and you break a window and then there is a broken window. No, it's just you open that window slowly, step by step, you learn, you teach, and the baby learns to sleep more independently. And I can share from my own experience, when my girl started to sleep, that was day and night. I mean, I've become from a very, very emotional. I could cry for any smallest reason. I mean, my husband would put a cucumber on a wrong table, and I could make a scandal out of that. And I was really, really not so patient as I wanted to be. And when I got my sleep, I mean, things have changed. That was a fantastic change, which made me, first of all, more calm. But the second thing that was when my girls started to sleep, they were more happy because they got the rest they needed. That is also one thing we sometimes forget, what you mentioned, that our children need to rest, same as we do. So sometimes this balance is somewhere in between, that we have to take care about ourselves, but at the same time, from a certain age, we can start slowly to teach our children to sleep more and more independently as well.
Yes, and I think that's at least that I would see it as the first step, because like we talked about, right? If you wake up every hour, every 2 hours, it's such a strain on your body and your mind, and you're just wearing yourself out, and it doesn't benefit anyone. But unfortunately, what we're also seeing in a lot of women, that even after their child starts sleeping, they realize that they have to relearn how to sleep. And that's a topic I really like to work with. And I actually tried even to make a course where we work with different aspects of sleep with moms. And here, it's really when we start looking into what is stressing you out, and how can you learn to take better care of yourself, to start being more confident in leaving your baby with somebody else, not feeling guilty about taking an hour out of your day to just, whatever it is, taking a bath or going to the shopping mall or going for a run, whatever makes you happy, remembering what makes you happy and doing that. Taking maybe a whole day out of your week, and saying it's Mama's Day, I am going to make a good mama today. So it's this topic of rest and stress and guilt around delegating some of your responsibilities actually ends up being central when we talk about mom's sleep. Because of course there is this physiological aspect, and we always start with these basics, going to bed at the same time, turning off the lights, exercising during the day, and then those principles are very easy to implement. But then we go into more interesting things like, but what about our emotional needs? How do we take care of those? How do we take care of all those anxious thoughts that are running through your head and preventing you from falling asleep? And it's a very complex topic, very interesting to work with.
But your course that moms are taking on sleep, how long do you talk about that? I mean, is it one day course or is it a long course?
No, actually, the first version I ran, it was in the winter, where I had to test the concept. It was a 4-week course where moms would get, it would be 1 week, it would be one topic. So we started with the basic physiology, and we moved on to stress, and then we talked about, what I call the mind games. So we'll get a presentation and video presentation from me, and then some kind of questions, food for thought, suggestions for changing their routines. There was a group where they could talk to each other, and then every week we could meet and talk about the questions or the problems that arise. And I actually think 4 weeks is a good format, because you cannot expect changes in one day. Because I mean, it didn't take 1 day to get to develop sleep problems, so it does take certain time to restore them. But my idea was that if I show what needs to be tweaked and what needs to be changed, and we support women going on this path, it will speed up the process.
Exactly. And there you touch another thing that is pretty important to my opinion, is that when mothers feel stressed and they feel anxiety, there is a need to talk to somebody. But to talk to somebody, not somebody who will say, oh, that's fine, that will pass. I mean, after 2 years, you will sleep again. But really to talk to somebody who could encourage you to take care about yourself, maybe to take the day off, maybe, as you said, maybe to take an hour off, and to have the right feelings about it. Because I clearly remember myself rushing through a mall because I just had that 1 hour and I wanted to do all the things in the world during that hour, and because I was just feeling, I'm not supposed to have that hour. I mean, I'm a mom. It doesn't belong to me to have free hour, So this mind games, like you nicely called it, is very big stressor for moms. So it's nice that you kind of make a support group for sleepless moms.
Yes, you see, that was actually one of my ideas, because when I interviewed, before I prepared that course, I wanted to really understand what the need is. And when I interviewed those moms, and of course I knew some of it from my own experience, but I realized that women are talking about, really having others to share this experience with. And those who were in the courses said, oh, one of the nice things was to understand that I'm not the only one with this problem, so I don't have to blame myself. And what you touched upon is that there is not a whole lot of conversation around these issues. Yes, we talk about postpartum depression and we talk about insomnia separately. But when I myself faced those problems and I was not even sure where I start to solve them, I couldn't find a specialist that would, tell me like, this is what you need to do. And this is very unfortunate, because it's an important problem that, as we started with, that affects mom's well-being in so many levels. So yes, I think we do need to talk about this more. And thank you for your initiative.
Thank you so much for joining me for that conversation. I think that this topic I'm talking about children's sleep, and that's kind of fine, but I don't have the knowledge you have to talk about grown-ups sleep, because there is a little bit of different physiology of it. But it's equally important, and I think for the first thing to change is the attitude that mothers are not supposed to sleep. I mean, mothers are supposed to sleep as much as possible, because that's vital for their children's mental health as well in the long term. So I think that's the first thing to be changed in my opinion. And thank you so much for joining me and helping me do that.
Yes, and thank you for this opportunity. And if I may, I wanted to mention also that if somebody who is listening to this, your followers, your fans, if they recognize themselves in this problem, my baby's sleeping, but I cannot fall asleep. I lie awake in the middle of the night. I made a little guide with 7 tips on what you can start looking at. And then, of course, it's only the basics. But what I found is that for some women, those simple principles are already enough to kind of, get their sleep back on track. So maybe we can leave a link under this video where people can download it and see if they find something there.
Absolutely, Nadya. Thank you so much for that list of tips. We will definitely put it in the links below, so that mothers who are lacking sleep could get good use out of that.
Yeah, it's in English, but I hope that it will be understandable for a lot of
we will
people.
take care of that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Nadya, so much, and
Thank
hopefully we can create one more conversation sometime. Thank
you.
you.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.